a pretty good job. Tip down in the 3, 2, 1. So as you can see, we lost it. This video is sponsored by House of Blades. They sent out this knife. Stick around for more information on them. Knife reviews have been done largely the same way for a long time now. You sit down, you talk about the knife, the good, the bad, the ugly. There's also been torture tests and different tests that a lot of them have just been bro science, and there's not been a real numerical value to them. Well, today we'd like to change that. I introduce you to the ECURT scale. Here you see we have all sorts of things from culinary to hard use to torture to utilitarian. We've got all these things that we're going to test on a somewhat repeatable manner. So with that being said, let's get into it. The first knife on the chopping block is the wee Banter, a knife loved by many people and designed by our friend Ben Peterson. So what does ECURT stand for? ECURT is an acronym. The E is for everyday carryability. This tests the weight, the size, how it carries in the pocket, how it deploys, so on and so forth. C is for culinary, how it does when, in this case, making a sandwich and cutting up some celery as a snack on the side. The U is for utility or utilitarian. This is stuff you do with your knife every day, cutting rubber hose, cutting cardboard, cutting rope, these different things like that. That is what utility is, the typical things you put your knife through. Next is rugged. This is where things get a little bit harder, like zip tie cutting, prying up staples with your knife, things that you shouldn't put your knife through, yet you can still do it and probably get away with it. And the T is for torture. This is putting a knife through something it should not go through, yet we're still going to judge it on how it holds up. So altogether that makes ECURT. Now we're going to score each category out of 10. Each subcategory gets a ranking of how it does with each item out of 10. And then we average that score out to see how it does in that category. So let's say it scores a 7 across the board in everyday carryability, then this knife would score a 7 in everyday carryability. And so on and so forth until we get to the very end, add up all the classes together, and then you get your overall average score to see how this knife ranks on the ECURT scale. The highest a knife can score is 50 out of 50. And the lowest is obviously a 0 out of 50. So with that being said, without further ado, let's jump into it. Starting our test off is everyday carryability, and the first section is weight. Now this is the copper Banter, so it's going to be a bit heavier than the regular. It comes in at 6.6 ounces. That's really heavy for a knife this size, so I would rank that probably a 5 out of 10, but we're going to go off what the G10 weighs, which is 2.6 ounces. Being this is a test of the Banter and not this one specifically, I'm not going to fault it for the copper scale, so I'm going to give that an 8 out of 10. For the size of this knife, 2.6 ounces is a really good weight. Up next is length. Now, we'll go blade first, and as you can see here, the length from the very tip to the very edge of the scale is coming in right around 2 3/4 of an inch. So I believe that's going to be your longest point. Now 2 3/4 of an inch is a good blade length. It's under that 3 inches for the 3-inch blade law. However, that will probably affect it a little bit later when we get to some of this other stuff. Overall length, so your overall length, you're coming in at right around 6 3/8 inches. And then closed, when it's going to be in the pocket, your width is coming in right around 1 1/4 inch. So you're looking at a good compact size and something that's going to fit in the hand and in the pocket really well. As far as measurement, length, and width goes, I'm going to give this as well an 8 out of 10. So next up, it's ease of use. How does it deploy? How easily does it close? And how well does that pocket clip work in your pocket? So as for the action on this knife, super snappy, super drop shutty. Very good job by Wee. It's snappy. The detent, pretty strong. If I flick it really hard, I can get it to come out, but ease of use is really easy. It's got a good detent, it easily deploys, and as well as easily closes. Now how about that pocket clip? As you can see, it is an inset deep carry pocket clip, so it fits down in there really nicely, disappears, very good, and as far as deploying it, easy to pull out, but shouldn't fall out of your pocket. Very good. So a very important part of ease of use is the lock. This one is a liner lock, and a good one at that. Not fantastic access to it, but still easy to get to and close. Now, I will say, anytime that we have a knife that has a non-finger safe lock, we're talking a button lock, crossbar lock, something of that effect, it's gonna get deducted a point. So where it would be an 8 in ease of use, this is gonna get knocked down to a 7 because it doesn't have a finger safe lock. Up next is materials, and again, we're going to be judging this as your regular Banter, so imagine G10 S35VN. Fantastic materials. G10, while on the lower end, is still a super strong material. S35VN, fantastic blade steel. Your hardware is going to be regular old stainless steel, and the same thing with your pocket clip. Absolutely fine, gets by very nicely. I'll give materials, again, an 8 out of 10. And especially when you include our last segment, which is price. Our price is going to be $108. An absolutely fantastic deal, again, for G10 S35VN, made by we, and a very good knife. So, our average score for this, let's do some math and then I'll tell you. So no shock, the WE Banter scored an 8 across everything except for ease of use. And again, the only reason is because of that non-finger safe lock. I kind of feel bad about that, but I feel like that's a good rule to have across the board. If it doesn't have a finger safe lock, it gets a knock away for ease of use. So this Banter's overall average score for everyday carryability is 7.8. Throw it up on the board. Up next, Culinary. Now, a lot of people like to use their knives for culinary. We have decided that we're gonna make a somewhat of an Italian sandwich. We were gonna use pepperoni, but I got these little smoked sausages. Got a tomato, celery, bread, and cheese. Now you might be asking, why did I choose these things to cut up? Well, each one of them kind of shows off a different thing for culinary use. So on one hand, you have bread, which shows off kind of a few things: the sharpness, the grind, and how sticky something's gonna be when it hits the blade. You also have cheese. Everyone knows who cuts cheese knows that this stuff will stick to a blade if not ground correctly. And also, again, you have to have good geometry to get through it. A tomato is like cutting up your quintessential fruit or vegetable. It's going to be really nice and show how sharp this is for sliciness. See how thin we can get those tomatoes. The sausage, again, this kind of just shows off sharpness. This stuff's soft, so you don't really have to have a great this and that for it, but if you don't have a good edge, it's not going to cut very well. And the celery is more for chopping. If people like to use their knives like I do for food prepping, we were at Georgia Bushcraft this past weekend, and I used the knives I had in my pocket to make the meal, and so we're going to see how the Banter does with chopping. Let's get into it. Up first, let's just do bread. I wanted a full loaf. This isn't exactly what I wanted, but as you can see here, actually cuts through that bread really nicely. It doesn't smash it down, it doesn't compress it, it cut really, really clean. So for cutting bread, I'd give it 7 out of 10. So let's cut the cheese real fast again. Does pretty well on this, and this is something that a lot of people do with their knives: cut cheese, cut stuff like that. And this does a really fine job. So I think for the cheese, I would rank this a 7 out of 10. We're starting to assemble our sandwich here. Starting to look pretty good. Up next, let's cut up a little bit of tomato. Now again, this is where blade length might affect it, but that sharpness of the edge, let's see how thin we can get those tomato slices. Starting out right here, it's just our edge cut there to get started. Now, this is a little bit of a thick blade stock, but you can see we can get some really thin tomatoes here. So, if you're looking to use this knife for food prep, that's something that you do a lot, then the Banter can do a mighty fine job at cutting a tomato. Now, if your tomato is much bigger than this one, you're gonna have a problem, but this has just enough blade length to get in there and cut all the way through the tomato. I'm gonna give that an 8 out of 10. So last but not least, let's see how it does with meat. Now again, you might be watching this and saying, hey, this is kind of stupid, but a lot of people like their knives for food prep. And look at that, cuts really nicely, clean cuts all the way through. The sharpness and the grind on this knife are really good for food prep. There's no doubt about it. So the Banter, I would say on the meats or the pepperoni or whatever you want to call it, say the Banter again gets a 7 out of 10. And so now our meal is done and our Banter has scored a 7.4 out of 10 in culinary. Now this is another thing that people really enjoy doing with their everyday carry knives, and that is chopping. So let's cut the ends off of this celery. Did really nice there. Hold it kind of like in a chef's knife grip with a pinch here. Let's see how we do. Wow, that's pretty impressive. I mean, it's doing a great job of chopping. I would guess that's because that drop point blade has just enough belly in the front to do a little bit of chopping, and I would give that an 8 out of 10. So now our meal is done and our Banter has scored a 7.4 out of 10 in culinary. So let's start out with cardboard. We have just your typical Amazon box here, and we'll start with the corners. Now the Banter has a really good, I believe it's either a flat or hollow grind to it. Really cuts well, slides right through that cardboard, no problem. Now, of course, you're gonna encounter thicker stuff, but on this thinner cardboard, even on the corners, sails right through it. Sails right through the cardboard there. You have your flaps here, no problem. Really tearing this cardboard up. Yeah, very nice job on cardboard. Let's double it up a little bit and see how it does. Yeah, even on a doubled up piece, flows through really well. I'm gonna have to give it an 8 out of 10. So we're trying to go by what's gonna take the most toll on the blade, and so next we're gonna do this rubber hose with a braided inside. We've seen other people test with this in the past, and I think it does a really good job. So let's see how the blade does on this rubber hose. This is gonna show you how sharp it is and how well grounded it is. And as we start, oh, that's some tough stuff there, but got through it pretty well. This is a 1 foot section, and yeah, it's cutting it pretty well. While this knife having a thicker blade stock may be getting in its way a little bit here, it's still doing a fine job of getting through that. And as I'm putting a lot of pressure on this knife, it's pretty comfortable in hand, very hand-feeling scales. And so I would say on the pipe here, let's give it probably a 6 out of 10. Now when it comes to stripping wire or cutting wire, there's nothing better than a wire stripper or a multi-tool. But I know a lot of you guys do this with your pocket knives. I'm looking at you, Spencer. So you take this, put the wire on the blade, take your thumb, press in, cut through the coating, trying not to press into the copper too much, roll it around until you've cut completely through that coating, and then you wiggle it a bit and take our pliers to pull it off here. Voila, you have made it all the way through that coating. So as far as in this reverse grip where you're doing that, the Banter does a really nice job. It's got a good flat spot for you to rest your finger on to do so. And I'd say when it comes to something like wire stripping, easy to use, shorter blade, let's give it a 7 out of 10. How does it scrape? Now we were gonna use Gorilla Tape for this, but it didn't end up working the best. But I can show you right here on this top of the leather, if you lay the blade flat and take off with a scrape, it will really get up under there and do a good job. This blade can lay flat because of the way it's ground really nicely, and so it scrapes just fine. I know this is a little bit of a weird test. Might have to figure out a different way to do this in the future, but for scraping, I think I'd give it a 6 out of 10. And last but not least, here we have a thicker piece of leather. Now this is gonna be for your utility cuts where your tip is down and you're dragging across a flat surface. Something like a sheep's foot or a Warncliffe or something of that effect, or even a Tonto work really well on here. However, this is a drop point blade, so it might not do as well, but let's see how well we can get that tip down and cut across this leather. Here we go, tip in. Oh, that's some thick stuff, but let's drag. Oh yeah, look at that. No problem. So you've got a belly out here at the end that really rests well, and you can also get it up here and put the tip down and drag. Oh yeah, works really well. We've got a little bit of thing on the end here where I'm not doing a good job of getting it started, but you see, you can drag across that leather really nicely and it cuts. So the utility cut of pointing the blade down, and let's do it one more time, dragging across here, yeah, that works really well. So as far as these utility cuts, these leather tip down kind of dragging cuts, I'm gonna give this another 7 out of 10. So now that we've cut hose, cut leather, scraped, stripped wire, cut cardboard, this comes in with an average score of 6.6. While that does seem a little bit low, I think the reason it suffered here a little bit is because of the thickness of the blade stock. So with that being said, the utility's out of the way, let's start getting a little bit rougher on this knife. Now, the R part of ECURT, rugged. We have zip ties, we have staples to pry, we have twisted sisal rope to cut, a board to feather stick, wire to chop through, and a hammer to get it done. This video is brought to you by House of Blades in Fort Worth, Texas. Not only do they have an in-person store, they also have an online store that you can check out this knife that we've tested in the video today. You can also catch them on YouTube, House of Blades, live at 5 on Wednesdays, and you can get your CDC knives over at House of Blades and use code CDC10 for 10% off any order. Thank you for watching, and let's get back to the video. So let's cut our wire out to length here. There we go. This will be our piece we use. right, here we go. We've already done this a little bit, kind of reshooting this, and boom. Lock is failing a little bit, but we are hitting it with a hammer. But the edge has just sustained a little bit of a catch right there. Very good. So, as we look at our edge here, there's no real damage or anything. So it's actually looking pretty good. Now this is the 20 CV variant. You'll probably get a little bit different with S35BNs, but one of the main things is it's ground pretty nicely. It's again got that thick blade stock, so there's no damage to the blade, thumb studs held on, so on and so forth. Well, for the hard use wire chopping, I think I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Next, zip ties. If it can stand up to copper wire, I think it can stand up to zip ties, but we are often told you're not supposed to cut them, so let's start with the suspended ones here and see how we do. Oh, no problem at all. Went through those two real easy, and it made me a bracelet too. Very nice. Now the little bit of a harder part, let's pry up under this. Let's see how they cut. Very nice. Let's put it on top here. Try to cut through it that way. Good. And the last one, let's see, how should we do this one? Put it in there sideways and pry upwards. Very good. So zip ties, absolutely no problem. Another 8 out of 10. If you've been watching knife testing for a long time, you've seen plenty of this stuff cut. This is twisted sisal rope. I believe this is 3/8 inches thick. Let's see how it does. Now this is again where that thicker blade stock might go against it, but it does come down to a very nice tip, so let's see. Ooh, well, that stuff is hard to get through, but it did cut through it. Edge is performing well. Having a little bit of trouble here, but doing just, I see why Pete was sweating all the time when he was doing these cuts. This stuff is tough, but the Banter is doing just fine getting through it. Could do a little bit better, but it is getting through it. One last cut. Saws through it okay, but not amazing. I'm gonna give that a 6 out of 10. Up next, something you don't do often, but something you might have to do in a pinch with your folder is feather sticking. So I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm not the best feather sticker ever, but let's get one started here. There we go. Seems to be doing an okay job. You can control it really well, getting a good grip there. Work towards the back of the blade and feather stick it up a bit. The edge is good and sharp. The grind could be a little thinner again, but it does a pretty good job. I think the reason it's not doing a fantastic job is because I'm not very good at this. So for feather sticking in a pinch, done fine. Lock held up just fine. Let's give it a 7 out of 10. All right, so next let's do the staple pry. I have 5 different staples. A lot of them are buried at different levels, and let's see how it does with that. So we've got one buried really deep right there. Let's dig in, see what we can do. Never do this with your knives, guys, never. But got in there, got it out no problem. Got in there, got that one out no problem. The tip is really beefy, which, as that blade stock thickness I've been talking about, comes in handy for something like this. So if you're gonna be prying staples, Baby Banter does a very good job, and I'm gonna give that an 8 out of 10. So our Banter, when it comes to hard use, actually scored higher than it did in utility with a 7.4. Very good job from the Banter. So as it stands right now, the Banter has scored a 29.2 out of 40. A very good score. But let's see in this next part if it can take its score to the next level. It's about to get ridiculous. First thing we're gonna do to torture it is digging. Something that you would absolutely not wanna do with your knife, but we're here to test and see what this thing can hold up to. Let's see how it does. It's holding up fine. Let's see how she held up. Just fine. No super damage on at the edge. Can't tell right now. Looks okay though. Looks all right. Well, actually, for digging, did absolutely fine. Well, it dug just fine. The lock held up great, and the blade doesn't look damaged or anything at all. I'm gonna give it 7 out of 10. All right, up next, let's see how it does screw driving. Another thing you should never do with your knife, but we have here, I believe it's an 1.5 to 2 inch Phillips head screw. Let's stick it in that slot, see how it does. Oh, we can't even get the cam, there we go. Really gotta mash it in there. So we've really gotta mash the tip down in the, oh no, there it went. So there, we lost our tip on our Banter. Actually held up pretty well, but, well, let's keep going. Can we get in there still? No, we have lost our tip on our Banter. So as you can see, we lost it. It held up to digging just fine. It held up to prying the staples and everything just fine. But that screw did it in. We got it a little ways out. So sadly for screws, the Banter didn't hold up, and I'm gonna have to give it a 2 out of 10. So up next, let's baton with it. Now with this having a close to 2 3/4 inch blade, or used to be anyways, it should do okay. Here we have a 2x2, so you have a little bit of room left over. Now, it's gonna fail. The lock is gonna fail, absolutely. But I wanna see how well we can get through this. So let's see how the blade holds up. We're gonna cut with the grain. Let's do it. Ready, set, go. Right there with the lock. Let's get back here behind those thumb studs. Oh my gosh, it actually did okay. Go against the grain now. While the lock keeps failing, ooh, while the lock super failed, oh no. Do it again. Well, the lock did fail, and failed pretty hard. It did make it through the wood, no breaking of the blade, no real issues, but that lock did fail, and I do think we need to count that against it. And so, I'm gonna say 4 out of 10. Now comes the second hardest thing this knife is gonna have to go through today, and that is chopping through a bolt. This knife could fly all to pieces, this knife could chip out, or it could make it through it with no issues. So let's do it. We're gonna put the bolt flat here. Knife is gonna be open, resting in one of the threads, and I'm gonna take this hammer, hold the handle, and whack the snot out of it. You guys ready for this? Let's do it. Safety's on. Everybody ready? All right, here we go. We're going about middle of the blade here. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Oh, let's keep hitting it. Oh, the thumb stud came off. So we're not hitting it on a solid enough object. Let's move somewhere else. Let's do it again. 3, 2, 1. Look at that. That is absolutely insane. Holy cow. So while we didn't get through the bolt or anything, it did just the tiniest bit of damage, but the knife's looking a lot worse than the bolt, so I'm gonna have to give it a 1 out of 10. And now the toughest thing we're gonna put this knife through today. On the bottom here, we have a 4-inch solid block. Weighs about 27 pounds, but it's solid. That's gonna be our backdrop. This, again, 4-inch solid, 27 pounds is gonna be dropped from my head height, eye level, down to the knife right here. This is our last part of the torture test. Let's see what happens. All right, trying to drop it flat from my top of my head height. Are we ready? 3, 2, 1. All right, come on up. Let's see what happens. Doesn't look like very much happened. Scuffed it up pretty good. Ooh, bit of side-to-side play there. But scuffed it up really badly here. Still opens. Actually, the lockup is better than it was a second ago. Oh, our pivot screw's gone. Shoot, dude. Pivot screw is gone. This thing is, yeah, absolutely borked. It's done for. But the Banter, boy, did it perform pretty well today. That concrete block drop is no joke. That's 27 pounds of solid hitting it like that. And this thing held up not too bad. We are in Yeah, we're in non-usable knife territory anymore, but it actually survived the day all right. We got a heck of a chip in the blade, missing a thumb stud, missing our pivot screw, and the knife is completely in half. But that's because we put it through more than it was supposed to. This ECURT test is really about the 4 main categories at the beginning, and then some extra credit at the end if you can get it. Now, since it broke in half with the concrete block drop, gonna have to give it a 0 out of 10. So with the torture part over, the Banter only scored a 3 out of 10. This knife was never meant for something like that. Again, that's just to score some extra points if you hold up to that stuff. But with all our average scores added up, it comes to a 32.2 out of 50, which is a really good score. And that is a good baseline to set for the rest of these tests. The Banter is not a hard use knife, but it's not a knife that you can't put through some things. It's a pretty good everyday carry knife, a decent culinary knife, a different utility knife, and it carries nicely. This is an all-around good knife. And so a score like a 32 is great. If you want to be up in the greats though, you're probably going to have to score a 40 and above. Those are going to be the knives that really, truly stand out. But the Banter scoring a 32.2 and kicking off our ECURT scale is absolutely fantastic. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe. This is the start of something that I hope is going to be great. Our ECURT scale, we're going to apply this to a bunch of different knives. Up next, look for the QSP Penguin, the Nafslander, the Civivi Yonder, the LT Wright Patriot. We're going to be doing some fixed blades and stuff like that too, so stick around for that. I'm really excited to be bringing you these videos. Give us some time to get into a flow of these things. Things might change, things might move around, and we'll do our best to adjust and make them something that you like to watch, but you also get some information from. You can find a chart for this knife, which is the direction we're heading, over on dailyknife.com. That's going to be your new website where you can see the scores of each knife that we have. They're going to be ranked, put in categories, different stuff like that. Thank you again for watching. Have a great day, and remember, stay crispy.